Breaking uranium news. So much happened this week. I am not going to waste your time with some boring introduction. Let's dive right into price action. First, we have Sprott Uranium Mining ETF down 4.86% on the week, part of a broader correlated stock market crash. NASDAQ down 3.55%. So we have to understand what is going on with the whole stock market in order to understand what is going on with uranium stocks, at least for now. The stock market had its worst first half since 1970. I've talked a lot about how we're in a similar period to the 1970s with stagflation, slow growth, high inflation, supply chain issues, geopolitical disruptions, very similar. So let's look at what happened in 1970, the last time the stock market did something like this. Here is a chart of the S&P 500 in the year 1970. You see that collapse. That is very similar to where we are right now. Here is the chart of the US stock market. We had a big pump, and now we have that first leg down. So what happened after that terrible first start to a year in 1970? We had what no one was expecting, which was a bear market bounce, massive rally. Absolutely no one is expecting that. I can foresee that from these levels. We have peak bearishness. Most institutions, everyone who knows anything knows how bad the situation we're in, which is why what happens in situations like that, you have a surprising move to the upside. I can foresee that happening in this market. But let's see what would be the catalyst behind that, besides a technical oversold bounce to clear out all the short positions, which obviously market manipulators love to do. They love to clear the board of short positions. So we have this chart from a Bloomberg terminal showing the last 3 of 4 largest inflation episodes in the last 50 years in these shaded regions. 1974, 1989, 2008. We did have massive inflationary episodes. And so what happened every single time inflation peaked? We had a meltdown in stocks, and the Fed either paused and then cut or cut rates immediately. Look at where we are right now. We're having this spike. The Fed is going to have to do something. We're going back 50 plus years in our history. They don't let it go too far out of control. Obviously, the late 1970s, 1980s was a different time. We could easily see that happening and that big spike in 1979. But speaking to the fact that we're expecting potentially an oversold bounce, that's probably what's next. So obviously uranium stocks are well positioned for that. This is another indicator that we're probably going to get a surprising bounce. In the stock market since 1877, only 4 years have had a first half as bad as the current one. 1877, 1932, 1962, 1970, we just talked about, now 2022. All of them had a positive second semester. He's talking about Bitcoin here, but we're talking about uranium stocks, which are correlated with the US stock market. And so if people have been dealing with the pain of a crashing stock market for the entire first half of the year, then generally every single time historically we get a bounce. Obviously good for uranium stocks. So let's dive into the news, the fundamentals for why investors are bullish uranium for the long term and what is going on. Starting from July 11th, Nord Stream 1 will be closed for a maintenance, which will last 10 days. But many are doubtful if it will be a temporary shut. Here is the price of electricity for 2023 delivery. This is future electricity demand. It's soaring in key European economies, adding to inflation and recession risks. Deutsche Bank says. So this is the setup. And so what matters now most is reliable, inexpensive energy. And so where are people going to go? Well, here's an indicator. Bloomberg, nuclear power could make a comeback in Sweden to help plug power gap. SMR interest continues to build. I think you'll see a dozen similar announcements over the next 12 to 18 months. Nuclear power is the future. Is the fuel cycle ready? We're going big into nuclear. This is an update from Sweden, just one country of many. And what makes this such an exciting trade is the supply-demand gap, which not a lot of assets can claim, right? Here is an update on the uranium supply-demand dynamic. We have this chart showing unmet utility demand for uranium. Uranium is the main fuel for nuclear reactors, and demand is estimated to continue growing and accelerate over the next few decades. So here's a chart of the massive growth in uranium demand from utilities. Just it continues to grow. Not only will demand continue to grow, but the spot price will have to continue to rise to incentivize production to meet the demand. So look at the current status of the US uranium industry. We have an absolute epic collapse over the last decade to all-time lows. And so this has to pick up. And the only way the supply is going to pick up is a rising spot price. We talked about this last week. You're seeing both. You're seeing demand and supply. Obviously, supply is in the bars. Demand is the red line. Massive supply demand deficit. Now that only matters if people want uranium. So let's dive into the news. Let's look at what went on this week. Russian and Chinese designs dominate nuclear reactors, warns the IEA chief. Since 2017, 87% of the new reactors which have broken ground are Russian and Chinese designs. The West is falling behind. Advanced economies have lost market leadership. The IEA has put together a plan for how the world can reach net zero emissions by 2050. And in that plan, the amount of nuclear power generation has to double. This is where we're going. This is why seeing the supply demand crunch, seeing the market fundamentals, seeing the deep sell-off, which no one could control and no assets really safe, seeing this bullish news is exciting. Nuclear power is gaining support after years of decline, says NPR. Over the past decade, nuclear power plants across the country have been shutting down early in favor of cheaper natural gas power. Now, an influx of investment from the government and the private sector is changing the trajectory of the aging U.S. nuclear fleet and spurring development of new nuclear technology. This summarizes what is going on. And so we have evidence of this in California, among many other places. Diablo Canyon extension looking more likely every day. Bloomberg, PGE considers applying for funds to keep nuclear plant open. PGE asked Energy Department for more time to apply for money. California Governor Newsom supports extending life of plant. This is a big nuclear reactor in California, which is supposed to shut down, which we know most likely will not. And obviously, the uranium spot price is pricing in a lot of these cancellations, which are just not going to happen. So we know the world is trying to pivot away from Russia's uranium because of the geopolitical turmoil and wars. Well, here's just another country. The pivot away from Russia's uranium continues as Czech Republic signs a deal with U.S. Westinghouse to provide nuclear fuel assemblies for its 2 Russian reactors beginning in 2024. Just an update that the deeply underinvested Western uranium nuclear infrastructure is getting an infusion of capital and soaring demand, which is going to cause the spot price to spike. I love thinking about the future and where this space could be and what the future is going to look like. Obviously, as an investor, you have to think about investing in early stage assets before the big growth happens. Well, this is just a fun concept of where we could be going. Would you take a sky cruise in a nuclear powered flying hotel? Science communicator and video producer Hashem Al-Ghaili has caused quite an online stir with his video, spectacularly showcasing a new sky cruise concept first created by Tony Holmeston, a flying hotel that can carry more than 5,000 passengers in the epitome of luxury. Thanks to its 20 nuclear powered engines, the Skytanic or Flytanic doesn't need to land, instead endlessly cruising above the cloud line, offering spectacular sunrises and sunsets, glorious night skies, and the promise of the aurora borealis up close and more extraordinary than ever. That's the beauty of nuclear power. You never need to stop. It is so reliable. You could fly forever. This is the game changer. Obviously, it's going to power space travel, which we've talked a lot about. TerraPower is building its next-gen reactor near a retiring coal plant in Wyoming, making the Western U.S. the new hub of innovation for nuclear energy. Obviously, the United States, which is lower regulation than anywhere else, just becomes the hub naturally for revolutionary technologies. It's happening in Wyoming. Bill Gates is supporting that asset. Before Fukushima, Japan was strongly pro-nuclear, and it seems they are once again, as citizens are now expressing anger over nuclear power plants being off amid a critical power shortage. My, how times have changed for uranium. This is in Asia. The people want nuclear. They're demanding it. There isn't just a supply power crunch in Europe. There's one in Asia as well. And people are demanding nuclear power. I will close with this. BWX Tech is developing this transportable microreactor that can thrive in remote locations to provide reliable, clean power. It's one of 5 reactors energy is supporting to demonstrate within the next 14 years. The future will run on nuclear. The world and the universe will run on nuclear. So many exciting developments. We will stay on top of this market. There's so much going on. We're due for a bounce. And if we get one, the highest quality assets are going to benefit the most. Stay tuned for more.